So who am I? I am Beth Tucker-Long. I am E3 Beth T on Twitter. You can find me there. I'm the editor-in-chief of PHP Architect magazine. If you've ever thought about writing for the magazine, or if you've never heard of the magazine, you should come and talk to me, because I would love to help you get started with technical writing, or introduce you to the magazine with some free issues. I also teach PHP courses, and I'm a freelance consultant. And I'm crazy nervous right now, because I didn't know I was speaking until about 5 minutes ago, so bear with me. So audience participation, I will stare here awkwardly at you until someone answers. So do us all a favor and pipe up right away. So what is continuous integration? Continuous integration, when I first started learning about it, was something I heard about with gigantic corporations with 300 developers spread all over the world. And they were using continuous integration. So I thought, oh, well, I'm a freelance consultant. It's just me usually. I don't need to learn about that. But later on, I realized, oh my gosh, it's amazing, it's awesome, and there's a lot of things that I can use as well. So let's start out with, what exactly is it? Now, the obligatory Wikipedia quote. So continuous integration is a very technical thing. It's a theory of development. And so what you try to do is you're trying to improve the quality of software by replacing the traditional practice of applying quality control after completing all development. So what we want to do is take our old way of doing things and replace it. So that definition was only mildly helpful, so I kept looking. And I came across Martin Fowler, who has been talking about continuous integration for about 10 years now. And he has a lot of great resources, and I do have my slides posted online as well, so that's why I have a lot of links in these slides. It's not so you have to try to write them all down now, it's so you can look at them later if you'd like. But Martin has some great articles about continuous integration and how to implement it. And he defines continuous integration with having a team integrate work frequently, usually multiple integrations per day, automating the build, including testing, and we want to integrate and test and detect errors and fix them as quickly as possible. So it's trying to speed up and make things more efficient. So taking a look at this when I first started was, okay, the first step is you have to integrate your work frequently. Okay, that's not too hard of a change. I can do that in my development. That's not something just for big corporations, so I can start integrating more frequently. But then the second step in his definition was automating the build and detecting errors and things as quickly as possible in an automated fashion. Now, as a freelance consultant, nothing that I did was automated. I did everything myself, all by hand, and obviously, that's not as efficient. So what we want to do is figure out how to automate the process. Now, before I could start automating the process, I needed to take a look at my code quality. So writing quality code makes it easier to test, and ultimately, easier to code. Now, how many of you have taken a look at code you wrote 2 years ago, or maybe even 2 weeks ago, and you're really embarrassed and you don't ever want anyone to see that code? Okay? All right, so having a coding standard can improve your code quality, but it also makes it easier to share your code, because now your code follows a specific standard, it's very clean, it's easy to read, and it's easier for other people to read. So I took a look at some coding standards, and I looked at PEAR and PEAR 2, and there's also a PHP standards working group if you want more information about standards that are out there. And so I picked a standard. Now, if you're working on a project with a team, you should all pick the same standard. But as a freelance consultant, I usually work by myself, so I just picked PEAR because it was most closely related to what I was already doing. Now, the PEAR coding standard is pretty expansive, and it's very picky, which is really, really painful at first. So getting started with the coding standard is very painful, I won't lie, but as you get used to it, it becomes second nature and becomes so much easier to do. So what kind of things are in a coding standard? Well, in the PEAR coding standard, they have things like indenting 4 spaces. Okay? That might seem like a nitpicky little thing, but having consistent indenting throughout everything makes it a lot easier to read and follow. It has different things like your control structure. So you have if, and then there's a space, and then your parentheses for the condition. And so there's a space between the if and the parenthesis, which is not something that PHP requires, but what it does is it makes it really easy to scan through the code and see which ones are control structures and which ones are function names, because there won't be a space with a function. So it does make it easier to read in the long run. So like I said, a lot of nitpicky little things. Now, if you don't like the standards that are out there, or if your team has to do something that doesn't fit into one of the standards that are out there, you can build your own custom standard. It's very difficult to make it broad enough, but still strict enough to cover everything. And you want it to be flexible enough that it's not making it harder for people to develop. You want it to be easier for people to develop. So make sure your standard is strict but flexible. And what you can do too is base it on one of the existing standards, and you can just customize the pieces that you need. So once you're using your standard, there's a tool called Code Sniffer, or PHP Code Sniffer, pardon me, that can help tell if you are following your standard or not. So what this does is it goes through, scans your code, and then gives you a readout of all of the things that you're missing or that you've done incorrectly. And PHP Code Sniffer does allow you to use a custom standard as well. So you can customize it even to match your custom standard if you build your own. So it's going to give you some output that looks like this. So you can see I ran it on a file. And with Code Sniffer, you can run it on a single file or an entire directory all at once. So very flexible in how you run it. And here you can see we're missing the file .comment. PHP keywords must be lowercase, expected false, but found false. So it does give you a lot of information about what's wrong, what you need to change, and where to find it. So when you first start running this, you'll probably end up with a really long report. But as you get used to the standard, these reports become smaller and smaller. Okay, so now we have our code quality, and we have a tool to help us automate checking the code quality. So now let's talk about testing the actual code. Okay, so obviously, if the code looks nice, that's great, but if it doesn't work, it doesn't do us any good. So we need some tests to actually tell if the code is doing what it's supposed to do. Now, part of continuous integration is automating the testing. Now, before this, as a freelancer, I was just, I'd go through and click a few links and check if it was working or something like that. Totally not automated. But having unit tests in place allows you to automate your testing. Not that I'm saying you shouldn't still go check your code once in a while. Always good to have a second look. But having the automated tests is significantly faster than you having to go through and check everything by hand. With a large application, to have a human go in and check every single thing could take hours. Your unit tests you can run in a matter of minutes and know if something's wrong. So what exactly is a unit test? Well, let's start with a unit. A unit is going to be the smallest piece of code that does one thing. And it's very important that you find that smallest bit that does a single thing. Because what we don't want to happen is when you run your unit test and it fails, we want to know exactly what failed. Okay, we might not know why it failed, but we want to know what failed. And if you have to do some more investigating to find out what part failed, then your unit test is too big. It's covering too many things. So you want to break it down to that smallest thing that it does. So for instance, if you have, let's say, a form, and it sends in data, and you check all the form data, and then you write it to a database. Okay? The smallest thing that it might do there is validating one of the fields. Okay? That validation to check the string length, perhaps. So what you want to do is make sure, like I said, that it's only testing one thing. Now, a unit test is going to be a piece of code, and it doesn't have to be very big, but it's a piece of code that can help you test to make sure that that one thing is working. We also want to make sure our tests are efficient so that we can run them often and frequently. And we want to make sure that our tests do not depend upon each other, because again, when that test fails, you don't want to have to do more testing to find out what failed. And if your tests depend upon each other, then you have to figure out which test is causing the failure. So each of your tests should be able to run by itself. So here's a function to validate a name. It just does a couple of things. It checks the string length, and it just checks some characters to see what kind of characters are being passed in. Okay, so a pretty basic function. So, but we have 13 lines of code for the function. And my unit test here is just a single line of code. It's a single assert statement. And all it does is it checks, it sends in what should be a valid name, and it checks if it fails. So unit testing doesn't have to be super complicated. It doesn't have to take a lot of time. It can be something that you can easily write in a single line just to get started. So how many tests do you have to write? Well, it depends. How many things does your code do? You want to have a test for everything your code does. So if your code's doing a lot of different things, you're going to need a lot of different tests. So There's no one right answer for how many tests you need because it really depends on how many things your coding is doing. So for writing these unit tests, obviously our goal is automation. In order to automate our tests, we need them to be standardized. And so you can use a testing framework. The testing framework is going to give you a format to do your unit tests in, which sounds really annoying at first, but actually makes them faster to write as you go on, because you don't have to think about how to structure it. It's already put in place. You just have to fill in your information. A testing framework also allows you to easily run all of your tests. So then you can just click a button in your testing framework, and there they go. And you have the results, easy to analyze. You get reports back. So testing frameworks can be very helpful. If you search for PHP and unit tests, you'll come up with PHP unit, I guarantee you. There are a ton of resources out there, lots of good documentation. So this is a testing framework that you can use. It's integrated with tons and tons of the popular continuous integration tools. It's integrated with a lot of different development tools as well. But one disadvantage here is that it's command line only. And in my line of work, I do the front end as well as the back end coding. And so I need something that can also do front end coding. So there's a couple of tools that will help you with that as well. Simple Test is one. One nice thing about Simple Test is, as its name implies, it's very simple. It's about 2 minutes to get it set up, and you can start testing. And it has a front end capability, so it will test the front end as well. So you can actually do things like test submitting a form and leaving a field blank and making sure the correct error message is appearing. So you can be very specific with your testing. One disadvantage of Simple Test is it's not as integrated as PHP unit, but it's still integrated with all of the tools I'm discussing today. Another great tool is Selenium. It's a little bit more complicated than Simple Test, but it does a lot more. So it is very fully featured. And also, it has a great thing called WebDriver, which will actually do the testing in each browser's native, using each browser's native support. So you actually can test different browsers using the functionality as well. So you can actually automate quite a bit. It's not a native PHP tool, but there are lots of different tools to help you integrate it with PHP projects and PHP-specific tools. Okay, so now we have our code is cleaned up. We are checking to make sure our code is following the standard. We've written our tests, and we've automated our testing. Now we're up to the build, okay? Now, I don't know about you guys, but my build process used to be a giant whiteboard with sticky notes on it telling me, okay, move these files here, clear the cache here, do this to the database, and then it's live, okay? Now that I have a 3-year-old and 4 cats, sticky notes don't work anymore. So automating the build sounded wonderful to me. I would love to write it once and then just be able to run it. So there's a couple of tools that can help you with that. Fing is the first one. It's based on Apache Ant, and it uses XML build files. The nice thing about Fing is the XML is very, very readable, so it's very easy to get started with Fing. Also, you can use PHP classes to extend your XML build files, so you can actually use PHP as well. And Fing is incredibly well documented, and tons of people are using it. So if there's something you want to do with Fing, you can probably just Google it, and you will find someone who's already written a nice build script, and you can just borrow some of it. So it's very, very easy to get started. It integrates with all of the other tools I've talked about so far. And the nice thing, too, is it's platform independent. So as a freelance consultant, I never know what platform I'm going to be working on next or who I'm going to be working with. So sometimes it's nice to have a platform independent project as well. But it's always good to have more than one option. So we also have Maven. Now, Maven is a Java-based project, but I am not a Java programmer, and I had no problems using it. However, to integrate it, you'll need a plugin called Maven for PHP, and that will allow you to use Maven with your PHP stuff. Maven has probably the largest library of third-party plugins I've ever seen. There are hundreds of thousands of them. So if you need to integrate it with anything, you probably can. So what does a build file look like? This is a Fing build file. It's very simple. Yeah, that's pretty readable. I'm never quite sure. Sometimes it looks a little too light or too small. But so you can kind of see here we're going through, and we're preparing a file. So we're going to create a directory called build. Then we're going to copy some files into it. And that's going to be our backup. We're going to tar it up. And then we're going to just display a message saying that everything's been done. So file copied and compressed in build directory. So you can kind of see, pretty easy to read, pretty straightforward. And you can do a lot of very easy things, or a lot of very cool things with it. For instance, you can run database queries, you can trigger cron jobs, you can do all sorts of kinds of things with Fing. So it can be very, very helpful. The last step, of course, in a project is documentation. That's the part, I don't know about you guys, but I hate writing documentation. So when I heard about automating documentation, I got really excited until I realized you still have to write the documentation. But it does help a lot. What PHP Documenter does is it gives you a format. And what you do is you write the documentation as you write the code. So you write it in your comments as you're going through the code. And of course, we should all be better at commenting our code. And so this is a really good way to force us to comment the code as well. So once you've done all your code and you have all your comments, then you can run PHP Documenter and it builds the documentation for you in a very nice, easy to read format. There's a great tutorial online that goes through step by step. And you're going to end up with comments that sort of look something like this. Obviously, you can do much more complicated things, but this is just a basic one. So it's in a comment. You start with a short description, and then you can have a long description with more information. You can use lots of multiple lines, and you can even put in markdown code so that you can really handle the formatting, which is very nice. So you can be very specific about how you want it formatted in the final documentation docs. You can put in authors, you can put in versions, you can describe the parameters that the function needs. And this is something like you're going to get when you run your documentation then. So you can see, even add some little graphical elements. It gives you an index of all your functions then. With the short description, you can click on it and get the long description. And it's going to track everything for you. I think the greatest strength of using something like PHP Documenter, besides the fact that it forces you to comment your code and write the documentation as you go, is that if the client comes back 6 months later and they're like, okay, we need this thing here changed. So you go into the code and you change it, and now you need to update the documentation. In the old way, where you wrote the documentation by hand, you'd have to go through and find everywhere that's mentioned in the documentation and change it. With this, you just update the comment that's right there where you just changed the code, rerun the tool, and it's updated everywhere. So it can really save you a lot of time. So now that we have all these different tools, we're still running them all by hand. And obviously our goal was to fully automate everything. What we're going to do now is find a continuous integration tool. Now the continuous integration tools are going to be a platform that's going to run all of these tools for you. So you're going to integrate all of the tools you're using into the continuous integration tool. So I took a look at cruise control. This is another one written in Java. Java is very big into continuous integration. So as you look through for things, you're going to find a lot of Java. But you don't have to be a Java programmer to use them. Don't let that scare you. So lots of different ways to install it. Very, very flexible scheduling system. So with cruise control, what you can do is say, I want you to run this build every day at 2 o'clock. Or I want you to run it every time I commit something. Or I want you to run it every day at 2 o'clock, but only if I've committed changes. So you can be very flexible in how it's scheduled. You can receive notifications for the output. So it can email you, instant message you, or it can give you a nice HTML report, which can be very handy if you're working with a project manager. So then you have a nice report already built that you can hand in to say how you're doing on the project. Now, it integrates with Fing and Maven, because those are Java things automatically. But to integrate it with your PHP-specific tools, you'll need an add-on called PHP Under Control. And that will help you integrate it with the PHP-specific tools like PHP Unit or PHP Code Sniffer. Now, of course, like I said, we never want to just have one tool at our disposal. So there's also Hudson and Jenkins. They used to be the same project, but they have sort of split. However, if you do go on, say, the Jenkins website, you'll find references to Hudson. Don't let that worry you. They're very similar. So Jenkins goes through and has a really nice GUI interface. So if cruise control is a little tough to set up, so Jenkins can be very easy with the GUI interface. So There's also third-party plugins, and it adds RSS as a messaging option, which is very nice. And to make it even easier to get you started, Sebastian Bergman has created a template for PHP projects. And so you can use his template, and it does a lot of the setup for you. So it makes it very, very easy to get set up on Jenkins. And lastly, there's reporting. Because now that we have all this stuff running, it's nice to kind of see, what is this all doing? Now, each of these tools does reporting on their own. But we don't want to have to go through and look at all the reports and try to aggregate the data ourselves. So you can use a tool like Sonar, which offers very, very in-depth reporting. It integrates with all of the tools I've discussed. And it's a web-based application. So this can be very good for teams that are dispersed across the country or around the world. And it's also very nice, too, for, say, a project manager who really shouldn't have access to the server, so you don't want them looking at the reports on the server. You can give them the access just to the web-based portion, and that way they can run the reports when they need to or look at the reports. They don't have to keep bugging you to give them to them off the server. It gives you the overall health of your project, so it'll tell you if you're having problems with, say, code duplication, or if you're having problems with not having unit tests or with unit tests failing, or if perhaps the problem is that your coding standard is not being followed. So it kind of gives you a big overview, but then allows you to drill down. So if one of your unit tests is failing, you can actually drill down through Sonar to that exact line of code and see what's going on. So it does give you a lot of flexibility. It also includes a thing called Time Machine, which allows you to see how your project has gone over time. So if you're working on a long-term project, it will sort of give you a way to see, like, okay, guys, you know, we were really bad at following our coding standard a month ago, but look how much we've improved. So it can really give you some good data, especially, like I said, if you're dealing with a project manager, to give you some data to back up, like, see, things are improving, we're really making some good progress. And one of my favorite things that it does is it has a technical debt plugin. Because I don't know about you guys, but when I go into a customer and I say, this code is terrible, would you let me refactor it? They're usually like, well, how does that change it on our end? It's like, well, it doesn't. It just makes my job easier. And they're like, no, I don't think so. So what you can do here is you can take a look at the code. And what it'll do is it'll convert the problems that the code has into a cost to reimburse. And so it'll talk about, okay, what exactly is the dollar amount that this bad code is costing us? All the duplication, all of the coding violations and things like that. What exactly does that cost us? And so now you can go back and say, okay, it'll cost you this much for me to refactor it, or it's going to cost you this much over the next year if we don't refactor it. And so it kind of gives you a way to translate the benefit of that refactoring into a language that those project managers can relate to a little bit better. It also gives you a breakdown about where your biggest problems are. And so that can be a really handy thing if you're going into a meeting with other developers. You can quickly look at this and say, okay, this is probably the biggest area we need to look at next. If you need some help getting started with continuous integration, there are a number of tools out there that sort of help you get started with all of the tools I've talked about. One of those things is TeamCity by JetBrains, and that is online. So you can set up your team, and it's free if you have a small team. I'm not sure exactly how small they're talking about, but since I was the only one logging in, it was free. So give it a try. But it really has everything all set up for you, so you just create the logins for everybody and you can start using everything. So very, very easy to get started. NetBeans also has support for continuous integration. And so there's that integrates the template for Jenkins jobs that Sebastian wrote. So that can also help you get started. So if you use NetBeans, you can get started on continuous integration very quickly. And there's a lot more things, too, that I don't have time to mention. But check with your favorite tool as well. A lot of IDEs have continuous integration help built in. OK, so after all of this, it's kind of a big thing to set up all of these tools. So what happens if you have an 8-hour project? And it's going to take you 12 hours just to set this all up. OK, that's not going to work. So what you can do is, one thing that can help is consider making it a deliverable to your client. Most clients have no idea what unit tests are, so they're not going to ask for them because they don't understand. They don't know what they are. They've never even heard of them. If you let them know, listen, if you give me a couple extra hours to write these unit tests, I will give them to you with the code, and then next time I need to make a change, it will be so much safer because all these tests can be run so quickly, we'll know if something breaks. Or if you're delivering it to a team and their IT department is going to take over managing the code, you can let them know, listen, this is going to make it easier for your team to, first of all, understand my code and be able to test it to make sure it's not breaking anything of theirs and that their stuff is not breaking mine. So let your customers know about it because chances are they don't necessarily know to even ask for it. So quick recap of what we've talked about. So talked about having a coding standard, and you can test it with PHP Code Sniffer. We talked about automating our tests with unit tests. And you can use PHP Unit, Simple Test, or Selenium. We're going to automate the build with Fing or Maven. And then we're going to automate the entire process with Cruise Control, Hudson, or Jenkins. Then we're going to do our documentation using PHP Documenter 2. And we have our in-depth reporting from Sonar. OK, so now we're up to the you guys have to talk part. So let's say that a customer hires you to create a registration form for a one-time event. It's a small customer with a small budget. It should take a couple hundred lines of code in a single file. Results will be emailed. It will be tested by the event staff and the marketing department on the live site as they do not have a test environment, and it will only be live for 2 months. In this case, using everything is probably not beneficial, but what tools might be beneficial here? Unit tests? Coding standards, my favorite word. What I said here was, if they don't have an in-house standard that they want you to use, you should still pick your own. Because first of all, when you come back to it later on, you don't want to be embarrassed by the code you wrote. You want to make it easier even just for yourself to read through. So even if you're the only one looking at this code and it's not going to be live very long, I still recommend following a coding standard. I said create unit tests for it because if you're testing on the live site, you want to know really quickly if something's broken. You don't want to have to go through and click on things manually and 15 minutes later find out it's broken. So when you're dealing with a live environment, having unit tests can make testing very quick. They probably don't need in-depth reporting if it's only going to be live for 2 months. Full automation of the build, well, if it's only one file, it's not that hard to do the build, so maybe you don't need to. And if it's, again, only going to be live for 2 months, they may not need documentation as well. OK, how about a customer hires you for an ongoing project? On the 15th of every month, they need you to go in and add a new survey to collect data and write it to a database. The previous month's survey data needs to be backed up and cleared out of the database when the new survey goes live. Continuous integration, but which pieces? It's what?
The build.
Automate the build, yeah. Anytime I hear clear out the database, I love automating the build because then I can back it up to like 30 different places before I do it, just in case. Anything else? My favorite S word? So following a coding standard. So yeah, following a coding standard. Since this is something that's going to be happening every month, having a testing framework along with your unit tests might be handy. It makes it easier to run your tests, easier to keep track of how things are going over time. Definitely automating the build. In-depth reporting, it's just a survey. They probably don't need in-depth reporting on how the code is doing. But documentation, maybe you need that. I mean, in that 3 weeks in between or 4 weeks in between you looking at that code, who knows how many other projects you've looked at. So having some documentation can be beneficial for you. Not only that, but I don't know about you guys, but that project sounds boring. And so eventually I'd want to pass that off to somebody else. So having documentation makes it easier to pass off. OK, a customer hires you to write one part of a very large application. Other consultants that you do not have access to will be working on other parts of the application at the same time. Documentation, yes. Unit tests. Coding standards. Everything. Yeah, that's what I said. You need all of it in this case. So a lot of projects, you don't need all of it. In a situation like this, you probably do. I mean, I pity the person who would have to take care of this code base if everybody wasn't using a coding standard. or documentation. I mean, just having to try to go through and figure out what the heck did all these people do would be an immense task. So having documentation, having reporting, all of that's going to help. Since you have a lot of different developers working in a lot of different places, all on the same project, having those large-scale reports and the fully in-depth reports from something like Sonar is going to be very helpful. So you can drill down and see, okay, how exactly is everyone doing, and what are our problems? What do we need to talk about? So, okay, so I have 2 takeaways for you. The important thing here to remember is not everything is beneficial enough to use in every situation. Okay? So continuous integration is awesome, but it's not awesome for every project. So take a look, though, and see which tools could help you. For instance, the coding standard. That's something that could help you in every project. Okay? But having, in-depth reporting and a full documentation suite is maybe not going to help you in the very small projects. Takeaway number 2 is the fewer steps I have to remember to do manually, the more successful my project will be. Okay? We use a lot of brain power to solve the problems and write the code. Automate the things you don't have to think about. That way you don't have to worry about it, it's taken care of. This slide is just so you can look at it later. These are links to everything. Okay, and I would love it if you would find me and let me know what you thought of this talk. You can find me on Twitter at E3BethT. Sorry, I gave this talk in Florida. That's why the Florida user group is listed there. And I didn't have time to update the slides before I came here. But I'm a part of my local Madison user group. If you are not part of a user group in your area, I strongly encourage you to find one. They're so beneficial. Having that network of people to talk to and help you out if you need something, but even just having free education every month at the user group meeting. It also is a great place to try your hand at talking or teaching someone else. I mean, the best way to learn something is to have to teach it to someone else. And so a user group can be very beneficial that way as well. If there's not a user group in your area, then you should start one. And I would love to help you. So find me, talk to me if you want some help starting a user group. There's quite a large network of people all over the world who would love to help you get started. So let us know. This is the link for my slides, so treelinedesign.com/slides, and I will also update Joined In with my slide link as well. Don't forget, I have free issues of PHP Architect. It's a digital magazine. We'd love to give you some free issues, so stop by and talk to me about that. And if you've ever thought about writing, we'd like to talk to you about that as well. And last but not least, like I said, I would really appreciate feedback on this talk. Leave me feedback on Joined In. And this is the current Joined In link for this talk for this conference. So you can also find it by going to Joined In and clicking on the PHP UK link as well. Or you can email me feedback at beth@musketeers.me. I'm trying really hard not to say .com. It doesn't work if you put .com. So beth@musketeers.me. All right. Any questions?
A big round of applause for Beth.
Okay.